Well, Diana Lindsay, welcome back to the learning community at the new school.
Thank you, Michael. So fun to be with you.
Wonderful. And I asked you to sing at the start, but then I found, and I want you to, but then I found a prayer that I wanted to start with this morning. And this is from a book. My hand shakes, so I'll hold it up, but it'll shake a little. A book by Neil Douglas Klotz, who some of you have heard of. It's called Prayers of the Cosmos, Reflections on the Original Meaning of Jesus' Words. That's what it looks like. Mm-hmm. And so he translated from the Aramaic the Lord's Prayer and the Beatitudes. And the deal is that Aramaic was the language that everybody spoke when Jesus was alive. And in fact, we learned from Erwin Keller, the rabbi, that Hebrew then was not spoken except by the priests and a few others, but the language was Aramaic. And so when Jesus taught, he would have taught in Aramaic. And I'm just going to, Douglas Klotz gives you the sound of the Aramaic, so I'm just going to read a few lines of the sound. Abun B'Shwaya Netquashmak Tete Malkuthak. Those are the first three lines. And of course, the Lord's Prayer in English, I'm just going to read so we all know what we're talking about here. This is the King James Version. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. That's Matthew in the King James Version. Now here is Douglas Klotz's translation from the Aramaic. O birther, father, mother of the cosmos, you create all that moves in light. O thou, the breathing life of all, creator of the shimmering sound that touches us, respiration of all worlds, we hear you breathing in and out in silence. Source of sound in the roar and the whisper, in the breeze and the whirlwind, we hear your name. Radiant one, you shine within us, outside us. Even darkness shines when we remember. Name of names, our small identity unravels in you, and you give it back as a lesson. Wordless action, silent potency, where ears and eyes awaken, there heaven comes. O birther, father, mother of the cosmos. So, I may read more of this to you at some point, but just imagine that was the way we said the Lord's Prayer. Just imagine what that would have meant. And by the way, Neil Douglas Klotz has an extraordinary afterword in which he points out that in the time of Jesus and for 300 years afterward, there was no distinction between Christians and Jews. That the word in the Bible, Jew, is actually a mistranslation. It should be Judean, which is somebody who lived in that part of the world. And so for a very long time, obviously Jesus didn't plan to start a different religion. And so for a very long time, there was a unity, a broad unity of experience and reflection. And in the Aramaic, that the language, which was the common language, was a language of, oh, mother, father, creator. So just imagine if that was the tradition of the Bible that we had inherited. Just imagine. So, Diana, here we are.
Here we are. I can see we're going to be going interesting places today, Michael.
Would you sing for us?
I will. This is a song we like to sing at Healing Circles Langley. And I think it takes the enormity of what you just read, the birther of worlds, the mystery, the magic, and it puts us inside ourselves to be that responsive to each of us. So I'll give it a try.
Wonderful.
Love, prepare me to be a sanctuary, kind and gentle, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you.
Oh, beautiful. Can you do that one more time? You know, I tried singing with you, but it began to break up here. I don't know. Yeah, try it just one more time for us.
Too much lag to sing
Yeah,
with.
yeah.
But
Try
you
it
can
one.
all sing at home with me.
Yeah.
That would be lovely. Love, prepare me to be a sanctuary, kind and gentle, tried and true. Whoops. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you.
Love, prepare me to be a sanctuary, kind and gentle, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Wow. I'd never sung that alone before. I always kind of followed along, but I thought I could manage it. Well, Diana, it's such a blessing to be here with you. And for those who don't know you and may not know me very well either, how should we describe you? How would you describe yourself?
No, dear Michael. I have lived many lives. I've been blessed to live many lives. And in this particular phase of my life, I describe myself as co-founder of Healing Circles Langley and Healing Circles Global. But really, I am just one who would like to be a living sanctuary for others. And perhaps that's a good place to start.
What a lovely place. So yes, you are the co-founder of Healing Circles Langley and of Healing Circles Global. And maybe a nice place to start would be when we first met.
It was a miracle. Is how I think of it. Kelly and I had just come through the experience of my recovery from stage 4 lung cancer. And we can talk more about that whole process. But as I was recovering, people came and wanted to talk with us. And we had our living room open for people. And then we had our phone line open for people. And then we were asked to speak. And all the time we were trying to figure out just what was it? Why was I here? We didn't feel like we really knew that answer, but we thought it was worth the conversation with others to see if they could ignite within themselves the kind of healing power that had worked in me. And so as we spoke, people said, well, you should write a book. And we were just in the process of doing that and just beginning to give a short talk that we gave at the Whitby Institute, which is where we met you, because you heard that talk. The interesting thing was the very day before, the building that I'm currently sitting in, which had been our office for a company we had founded, we were just transitioning. We had closed the company, and we wanted to spend our time having these circles of 2 with people, or circles of 4 with their caregiver. And we thought this would be a nice place to do it. And we were going to rent the downstairs. And Kelly came upstairs and he said, you know what? We need to dedicate this whole building to healing. And I had wanted to give back to the community that had supported me. So we said, yes, we will do this. We will dedicate this building to healing. And that was the idea that took us all the way to dinner. And then the next morning, we were the keynote speaker. And by noon, we were talking with you, and we said, we have this idea. And you said, I have this idea. It's called Healing Circles. And we partnered. Now, the amount of time it takes to go from idea to working with the leading person in the world on the subject usually is a lot longer than 12 hours. But that's what happened. And we have been partners in thought, partners in crime ever since.
Well, I would beg to differ on the leading person in the world, but we'll let that one go. But what I can say for sure is that I had the idea for Healing Circles, which, as you know, it actually came out of conversations with my colleague and yours, Rachel Naomi Remen, because we had done the Cancer Help Program together for, at that point, 35 years. And how long ago did we meet? How many years ago was that?
6.
2006?
No,
No, 6 years ago, 2014, right. And so, so 6 years ago, it was about, we'd been doing the Cancer Help Program for 28 years. And Rachel had always said that she wished we could put the Cancer Help Program in a box so that it could be shared widely. And so the idea for Healing Circles really came out of the idea of putting the Cancer Help Program in a box, seeing if we could figure out what was core to the Cancer Help Program. And Rachel had always said what she thought was core is that we heal in community, that it is in community that we heal. And so I began to go around and talk to the centers that had started cancer help programs based on the Commonwealth Cancer Help Program and done them for at least 20 years. And that was Callanish in Vancouver, British Columbia, and Harmony Hill in Union, Washington, and Smith Center for Healing and the Arts in Washington, D.C., and Commonwealth. And there were actually a couple of others that I didn't know about at that point. There was one in Texas. There was one in France. There may still be some I don't know about, but those were the ones that we knew about. And so I had the idea, but I will tell you, Diana, Lindsay, that if I hadn't met you, I am not at all sure that that idea would have been translated into action, because it's one thing to have the idea. It's another to find a partner, one of whose great gifts is manifestation, is the ability to take an idea and turn it into reality. And so you started with Healing Circles Langley, which is a completely extraordinary place, and really, in many respects, the flagship and training center for our global work. And then we began to build out into Healing Circles Global. So what would you add to that?
Well, that it's been co-created each step of the way. I saw a word, actually, Michael, that's that manifestation, reify, to make real, to take an idea and to make it real. And I think the beautiful thing that happened here within the Whidbey community was that there was talent here. There were people who were good at taking ideas into reality. I know that I think Charles is on the call, and Betsy McGregor, who were part of that team. And I think the part of reifying something is just the belief that it's possible, and that you don't have to have all the answers, that you begin. And the team of people that we pulled together as our thought circle listened, shared their ideas, and then they turned to me at the point that I started making too many PowerPoints and strategic plans. And they just said, no, Diana, just go. Just start. And then respond to the needs of the community. And it actually, that one piece of advice transformed my life, my whole life. Because from then on, every person that walked in the door, every thought I had, everyone I encountered everywhere, I saw as messages that it was only mine to respond to, and that they were teachers. And so each one that came in the door were teachers. They were teaching us about what need was. They were teaching us about who they were. They were teaching us about how healing flowed through them. And so it just kept evolving so quickly, because this became a place for people to serve. And as we've talked many times, the human drive for meaning and purpose is so strong, and it's so healing. And simply to provide a place where that can have fruit, perhaps that's the biggest healing of all. So,
Mother Teresa says that loneliness is the great poverty of the West. And you've often talked about how much loneliness there is, and particularly under COVID skies, where there's so much isolation. And indeed, that's why we have felt that this moment is the moment to really open up Healing Circles to everyone we can reach who finds our particular way of doing circles to be useful to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew that for myself, because when I was diagnosed, I think every cancer patient faces this. You just are pushed off a cliff at that moment of diagnosis, and you fall flat on the ground, and really it occurs to you very quickly, I may not get up. I may not get up. And that happened to me, as it happens to everyone. And then there's that dreaded moment, even if you get yourself to hands and knees, where you have to tell people. And you can't imagine that, because you're pretty sure that even though you're on hands and knees, you're going to be right back down the next time you have to tell that story. And because we live in a community in which we were blessed to have many friends, there were a lot of people to tell. And I simply could not face it one by one. And so very practically, I invited them to an open house at our house, thinking in 2 hours I could tell everybody, and then I could go back down to my prone position. But when it came time to actually write the email, I I wrote The Great South Whidbey Love-In, which ended up attracting 125 people to come. And in that time where I thought I would be fairly immobile, instead the presence and the love of others had me singing and dancing for 6 hours and feeling better at the end of it than I had felt in the beginning. And the day after, I had the awareness to realize that somehow there had been this healing intervention where you could be not well and then well. And there was no medical intervention in between. There had just been love. And so the next morning when they told me that there was no cure, that I had only months to live, in my mind, I'm not sure I had the courage to voice it to my doctor yet. I go, but I had a love-in. Right? It's not necessarily a logical thought in the face of what was in front of me, but it buoyed me up. It gave me some strength. And throughout the course of my illness, I felt the strength of that community. I felt the strength of my family. And above all, I felt the strength of my husband, Kelly. And there were many pieces of the story, and we're going to maybe get to one of these, which was the inner healing process. But that outer support, I also knew was critical. And when we started to tell the story, my heart was broken by the number of people who said, but I don't have a Kelly. I don't have that network of friends. I'm alone. I have a cat. And that weighed on me because while I couldn't say that I could help you heal, what I could say is, I will support you. And so that just felt like a gesture that we could do. We could provide that place for anyone at first on South Whidbey that needed it. And in the process of doing that, I started to do research on social support. And I thought that, this might just be me. This might just be the path of an extrovert. This might just be the path of somebody who likes to sing and dance with others. This might just be Whidbey. But as I did the research, and Michael, you had a beautiful chart that was part of your original training, and it tracked a long-standing survey of a study of nurses in Alameda County. Mm-hmm. And in it, it showed what contributed to longevity in cancer patients amongst all of the other things that people choose to do, like diet, like exercise, like supplements, like sleep. And diet and exercise were a 40% gain. Supplements were very low. Sleep was pretty good. And social support was 70%. Of all those things we talk about all the time in the press and amongst each other, social support was more powerful, and yet we weren't talking about it at all at the time. The research was just starting to burgeon. But I took that as, wow, that's my goal. Because what they didn't really specify is what is good social support. And the research was quickly demonstrating that bad social support, that wasn't any good. It wasn't just the presence of people. It had to be good social support. And I think really that's what the whole Healing Circles movement is about, is to try to understand as humans how we can really be of use to each other along our own healing journeys.
Mm. Yeah, just briefly mention that yesterday I did a healing circle for a friend in Portland who has a difficult cancer situation. I think she's on today. And it was remarkable because she had this beautiful group of friends, but they were new to circle work and new to circle work for someone with an advanced cancer. And so they kind of assumed, you have an advanced cancer and maybe they didn't know, but some of them thought maybe this is it. Maybe we're kind of gathering to say how much we love our friend, but we don't know how to hope for the future. Just in terms of physical recovery. So part of what I needed to do when I joined them was to say to them, you know what? This hope and prayer that our friend has to do what you've done, Diana, to do really well. How many years are you now from?
14.
14 years out from being told you had months to live, right? And I said to them, you know what? There's a strong literature on complete spontaneous remissions from advanced cancers. These things exist. There are a strong literature. But more than that, even if somebody doesn't get a complete spontaneous remission, there are hundreds of people that I've met in the Cancer Help Program who've lived far beyond what was expected. So if you see it as a distribution curve, the curve, when the oncologist tells you what he anticipates, he's giving you a median, which is pushed to the left by all the people with no good medical care, no social support, who are depressed and may not even want to stay around. Whereas the kind of people who feel some inner locus of control, feel that in some way they can matter in their own lives, and really want to engage with the effort to live, where are they? They're not at the median. We don't know if they're the top quartile or top 10% or whatever it is. And so to have a perspective that whatever else, you're not going to limit the degree of healing that is possible for you. Not only emotional, mental, and spiritual healing, but physical healing, that you're not going to limit that you're not going to say, I accept the prognosis. You can hear the diagnosis, mm-hmm. but not to accept the prognosis. And so in any case, and then we talked about how to do healing energy. But I think that awakening people to the possibilities of deep intentional healing is a profound part of what healing circles can do, and really, in many ways, that's simply done through this expression, as you say, a love-in. A healing circle is, in a sense, a love-in, and an opportunity, which we can talk more about because we have such a good methodology, an opportunity not to get in each other's way, and an opportunity to do this in a way that really maximizes what each person can find. So, but say more about the inner journey that this love-in launched for you. What was it actually like at a more granular level to discover how you could deeply contribute to healing yourself?
I will give it a try.
Okay.
You can walk me through. So I got you to Monday of the week after the initial scans and tests. This is when I made it to the specialist at Seattle Cancer Care Alliance. And the report was bad, based on the original scans. There, no hope, no treatment. And then you begin this process of more and more tests. And each test came back worse. I had a big mass in my left lung, but I also had masses in my right. I had it in my lymph nodes in the mediastinal area. I had it in my brain, and there was a good possibility I had it in the fluid around my heart. So, day by day, I'm just getting bad news. But I remembered an experience that I had had when I had had cancer 20 years before. That cancer I had discovered through a dream. And I wasn't really into dream work. I just felt like it was important. And I had used dreams when I'd gone into therapy in my 40s. And so I took that dream back to my therapist. And she said, Diana, you need to get to a doctor. So I went to one doctor and he goes, it's nothing. And I go, but I had a dream. I need to keep looking. So I go to the second doctor and that doctor says, it's nothing. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, I've had a dream. Mm-hmm. If these tests that you're about to do come back positive, where would you send me? And I walked out the door and just called that person, not even waiting. And that person immediately identified the cancer and said, get to the hospital now. So I knew that the body could convey important information. And that particular cancer, we caught at stage 1, stage 0. And I was fine, but it was in a complicated place, a lot of surgical complications. And it took quite a while to get through them. And one of the issues was simply, it was colon cancer, too close to the bladder, issues getting catheters out, all that kind of thing. And they put you through a terrible protocol. And I'm lying in bed one night and I'm going, I don't know that I can do this. And I sense in that sort of blurry place where you're in a twilight zone, I sense the presence of a woman at the foot of my bed. And I go, oh my gosh, you're my bladder. Now, I had not been in the habit of calling figures on my bed organs in my body. I don't even know where that came from. But she goes, yes, I am. And I said, being a mom, I could take a look at her, see how exhausted she was, how tired she was. And as a mom, I did what I would do if it was my child. I just went and held her. And I said, I can see that you just really can't do this anymore tonight. And I'm with you. Let's take a break. But can we make a deal? In the morning, can we be done with this? And she said, deal. And in the morning, we were done with it. Even though we had tried weeks to be done with it, that moment changed. So I thought that experience was just plain weird. I didn't tell anybody about it. I'm a very logical person. How could that have any effect at all? But in the moment of my greatest need, which was that week after diagnosis, I'm looking for anything in my toolkit I've ever experienced. And I go, how about lung woman? Can I go do that again? And I could see lung woman stretched out on a tarmac with emergency helicopters in the background. And I do the same thing I did with bladder woman. I run and I hold her, but she's underneath a giant boulder, which immediately represented the size, the mass of the lung cancer. And I said, it's too heavy. I can't lift it on my own, but I can stay with you and hold you until the emergency team shows up, thinking this is the doctor, the medical team that's going to do all this for me. And then out of my body sprung a circle of 12 women. And they said, we are the healthy organs of your body, and we will wait with you. Now, years later, I took Qigong. Years later, I learned about the Chinese meridians. There are 12 of them corresponding to each organ. And I think that circle was, that sense that not only are we going to wait for those helicopters, but we're also going to use the body to support itself. And we're going to use the strength that exists in some of those organs to help balance the distress that others are in. And so throughout that week, I kept going into this space and getting these just brief images, but every single one showed me getting better. And that was incongruous with what my scans were saying. But it gave me courage, I think, to say, I don't know where healing is going to come from. I'm going to take the pill they're suggesting, but I'm also going to try for this mind-body connection. I have absolutely nothing to lose. And that was my first beginnings into it. And I thought of it as, here we are, body in distress, me in distress, needing to work together, no clue how, no tradition of how, no practice in how. And so we're going to be beginners at this. We just need to find a language. And in fact, we had one. It was the realization that we had this imagery as our language. And at first I felt like, well, that's a pretty slim thread to base a miracle healing on. I can't even always remember these images. I can't always remember my dreams. I can't always interpret them. How are we going to do this? And I go, well, I had learned French and Spanish and Italian. It's like a foreign language. And at the beginning, you just have bonjour, and then you move on to comment allez-vous. And so that's what I began to do with my body, bit by bit.
And when we've spoken before of this, you've spoken about how you came increasingly to trust the guidance that you were getting.
So I think trust is a really critical issue in this. I feel like, it's my belief anyway, that we all have some access to this. We all dream, for one. And I felt like this meditative process was basically lowering my brain waves to the theta level, which is where you come up from sleep into when you dream. And so dreams have a particular quality, that is lots of strange things coming together into a whole. Whereas when I'm coming down, they were a little more organized and therefore more able to be remembered. So that was a wonderful way. But because it's coming through the mind, I felt, well, there's the risk that the mind is fooling itself. The mind is saying, here I am bathed in light, I'm healed. So that was something I had to work on. Just which messages am I going to trust, which feel authentic to me? And I found that the difference was whether or not I was surprised. If it was an image that my intellectual mind could conjure, I didn't trust it too well. And if it was just a surprise, I did not expect this. I did not expect to be here. I did not expect what happened. Then I would perk up and pay attention.
Brother David Steindl-Rast, who's a wonderful Christian mystic, says his favorite name for God is surprise.
Oh.
Isn't that beautiful?
That is beautiful.
Yeah, it said it's the only thing that doesn't limit God. Yeah. So you came to this sense that what you were really going to pay attention to was when an image surprised you. But you were also making decisions about medical treatments where you weren't always following what the doctors were suggesting. And you were, just as in your first diagnosis, you kept looking for somebody who would listen. In the second diagnostic process, you were often making choices and pushing for things that were not what the doctors had in mind.
Yes, and that was an interesting journey in and of itself. I have a wonderful doctor. And he himself based his first decision on an intuitive basis. Mm-hmm. He recommended a first line of a new targeted therapy as a first line of defense. It would take 7 years before the FDA approved that drug for first line defense.
And it is.
Which was Tarceva at the time.
Right.
And I tease him because I say, that was an intuitive choice. Mm-hmm. And he goes, well, the other options weren't good. Mm-hmm. So, he says that falls within the realm of his logic. But nevertheless, he took a look at me and he said, you don't look like my typical patient. And he said, I'm not going to pull you down. You're still traveling the world. You're still teaching around the world. I'm not going to put you into chemo, was basically his choice. And so he gave me this targeted therapy. So I had to go through this switch in my mind that said, you just told me that you don't have a cure. And so I figured from that, therefore, I would have to get us where I wanted to go. Proverbially, if we were going from Seattle to New York City, he's just getting me over the Cascades. And I would have to come up with every single tank of gas to get us the whole rest of the way. But then I realized, no, he's going to come along the whole way. And he did. But very quickly, we started getting results that put me all the way on the edge of the curve very quickly. And so the more you start getting to the edge of the curve, there's no evidence, right? You're in the realm of anecdote pretty quickly. So I felt that although I really trusted my doctor, although I really trusted the tumor board, that my body deserved a place at that tumor board because it had knowledge that they didn't have. And they did not have a massive evidence on their side. So I felt like I was going to co-create this healing path. And what gave me the interesting confidence in that was what started to happen. So at first I would just see single images. But then as I started to enter it every morning, every afternoon, and every night, it turned into video. And it kept changing its scale. So it started with these women dancing on this rock, which I think symbolized the lung. And then it quickly was moving down into more of a cellular level. The dancers were popping individual cells, which were releasing what looked like bubbles in my dream, whole caverns full of bubbles. And I'm in an airport and I walk by a scientific magazine, and on the cover is the picture of apoptosis. What happens to the cancer cell when it explodes? It's a water cell, it explodes. There's just all these little bubbles that come out. And I go, that's what's happening in my meditations. And then I go look up the article, and it describes apoptosis. I'd never heard of it. And then but meanwhile, my scan showed the tumor had already gone in half. So then I'm spending this time trying to get the bubbles out of there. I get this feeling that the most important thing is to rid the body of what I now know are blebs. Well, the research that shows how the blebs themselves can cause metastasis if they're not out of there, that didn't come for a few years. So the image was, talk about surprise, this pole vaulter who comes with this big pole, plants it in my lung, and all of the bubbles, evacuate out by it. And years later, I asked the head of lung biology at the University of Washington, what was that? And he goes, it looks like hyaluronan, which is the protein chain that macrophages come in to eat the blebs, and he showed me the scientific picture of it. So each time I kept having imagery that would then be shown in my next scan to be accurate. I started having image where the dancers couldn't work anymore. They were on just like lava. And I think that was the moment where it started to turn to scar tissue. And when we had surgery later, in fact, there was a lot of scar tissue. And then I had imagery of hands massaging the lymph nodes. And the next scan showed that the lymph node involvement was gone. And so I started to trust. And when the cancer came back, I had a dream that it was going to come back and that the answer was a big streak of lightning. So when it did, in fact, come back, and the doctor said chemo, I said, no. I've had this dream that we need lightning. I think we need radiation. And he goes, no. You have a systemic disease radiation is when it's still in the barn. Your horse is long since left. And so we said, okay. And we went and took our canoe and went canoeing down a river, and we capsized and we got ourselves out of the river, and we make it to shore, and the phone rings, and it's the doctor. And he says, I was talking to my partner, and maybe it's not so far-fetched. If you can find somebody who's willing to do it, I would support you. And I found a doctor at the very beginning of a procedure that is now common called CyberKnife, or very targeted radiation. And it was new. Insurance didn't pay for it. But he said, you know what? You're already on the far branch of a tree. You are already here. I trust that we can help you in this. So that decision turned out to be really pivotal. I think if I had done chemo at that point, I wouldn't have made it. Because I still had a working immune system. And when it came back again, I also had a dream. And this time the dream said, wait, watch and wait. It had an alligator coming out of the bushes, and it had a family of otters. It had a wise owl eagle, and it had 2 Clydesdale horses blocking the ability of the alligator to get out. And I thought, those horses are the Qigong and Reiki that Kelly and I had begun to learn. And I said, I think we can do it with that. And so we talked the doctor into watch and wait, and he was willing to give us 2 months. And then he kept scanning me, and there was no growth. And we got 9 months that way, which was exactly the same amount we got from CyberKnife, by the way, one costing $100,000 and one costing nothing. And then the cancer came back again and again. I had another dream, and it said surgery. And the doctor came in and said, your cancer is back. I think we can try surgery. So it was, it was an interplay between me and the doctors. It was not saying, no, you're wrong and I'm right. It was definitely a co-creation, a co-evolution of thinking. But I felt like my imagery was my body talking, and I felt that my only job was to give it voice. So ultimately, yes, I did trust.
It's so interesting because I imagine there are many people listening to us who really get this, but there are others for whom it seems, or who will hear it, it seems so far out. Yeah. So far out. And what I want to add to what you're saying from, 40 years of following this work is, first of all, that the power of the imagination in healing is really extraordinary. And doctors like Marty Rossman, MD, who've written about imagery and healing, what one can harness is really extraordinary. The second thing is the reality of intuitive medicine or medical intuition. And that also I have witnessed firsthand working with physicians and other colleagues who are medical intuitives. And it's really stunning, as you know, Diana, it's completely stunning that, many physicians, like your doctor, use intuition. But the thing about intuition, like imagery, is it can be trained. Mm-hmm. And the more you train it, the more you can trust it. And so I have watched physicians who have developed medical intuition as a skill gain more and more and more confidence. Very objective physicians who have, kept their feet on the ground and are excellent conventional doctors. But they've just realized that rather than running a battery of 25 tests, maybe they'll do one test. Or maybe they'll even recommend something they haven't even tested, but it isn't going to do any harm. And, somebody thinks something is viral and it turns out to be bacterial, and they saw that it was probably bacterial or whatever it is. And so, for me at the start, this was virgin territory. I mean, I've always had an open mind about integrative therapies. But over time, I have just come to recognize that what you're saying is actually true. And that the material science world has so little place for that because we don't understand it in, science. I mean, we know that imagery works, but we don't understand why, Mm-hmm. We don't understand. And the third thing we haven't even talked about, although you referred to it now with Reiki and Qigong. So there's imagery, there's intuition, and the third is there's energy medicine. And so you were combining all three of those.
By the end, yeah.
By the end, yeah.
Yeah. Michael, obviously it's hard for me. Well, it was hard for me to tell this story, right? It just was not part of a Stanford-trained person, a very logical. It was very hard for Kelly. Kelly was trained as a biologist. We did not come from a mystical tradition. We did not come from an intuitive tradition, but we had three decisions in our life that we made from pure intuition, and they were our best decisions. And we even commemorated Best Decision Day. And one was the day we decided to get married. Mm-hmm. By walking down a trail and looking at each other and knowing, oh my God, that's what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. And we walked down a trail a few years later and we decided to start a family. Mm-hmm. And then we came to Whitby and we bought a house in a day.
And figured out later how you'd make a living.
And figured out later how we do it all. So we had experience in our lives of trusting intuition, but those were hunches. There was no training in that. That just kind of bubbled up. And so I felt like the word you used, I had to get better than just a hunch, because the way the mind works, what we used to call right brain, I think that's simplistic now, but this intuition, we have two types of brains. We have the slow brain, that is our thinking brain that uses up a whole bunch of energy. Mm-hmm. And so the brain also has this more fast serving up of insight. And the insight can be, and usually is, very holistic. It can see parts that the intellectual brain, it can see holes when the intellectual brain only sees parts. But the problem is, it's also what serves up all of our bias, all of our habits. So it's a force for good and it's a force for evil. Mm-hmm. Intuition, that serving up isn't always good. And so I felt as an observer of it that that's why I had to think about that authenticity. Is it just serving up a prejudice on my part? Or am I actually willing to sit and listen for a deeper kind of message? Now, one thing I'll say about the shift from imagery to Qigong is when I was practicing this, and this is a desperate woman, right? I'm a desperate woman. What do I have to lose? And also, there was no evidence for me. I think it might have been very different for me if, it was a truly evidence-based path for me to get to well. But when there isn't, when you are way out on the curve, that becomes a different question. The other thing that gets there is I go, well, so the doctor gave me a 1% chance of making it to 5 years. And at some point in it, and I just told this story to those who were being trained, at some point I was able to shift you're going to die with 99% certainty. I was able to shift it to, how do I get into the 1% club? And what I realized is you don't get into the 1% club with 50% solutions, right? If everybody did it, if there was a known path, if it was evidence, I wouldn't be in the place I was in. I also recognized that I couldn't, in the amount of time they had left, get a complete microbiology degree and a complete extracellular matrix degree. And, I had to trust that to the world's best minds. And they didn't have a solution. So I figured, I was not going to get there logically. I needed to bring other powers to be. And Marty Rossman actually was the one that ignited this for me. I listened to his tape, and that was my first entry in there.
So there's much more we could pursue in these lines, but let's talk about Kelly now.
Mm-hmm. So Kelly, I just alluded to, really fought this sense of hope that I had. I really understand it. As a caregiver, you're faced with all the data, and it's hard not to just believe it and be overwhelmed. And I did the same with him. I understand it. He really did not understand this imagery, and he really didn't understand the energy work. But someone taught us a very simple piece of energy work very early on, and the cough that I had incessantly after people did this stopped. And so that was Kelly's first shred of effectiveness, of evidence that enabled him to kind of relax a little bit. And at the end, what for him as a caregiver, it said, there's something I can do. I can do this energy practice with her, and she'll feel better, and I'll feel better, because we both will have relaxed. And we thought that was good enough. And what's more, we thought it was hysterical, so we laughed a lot about it. We didn't have any faith in it, but we thought, well, this is curious. Yeah, surprise. But by the end, Kelly became a Reiki master. And he devoted himself full time to becoming part of my healing team. And he was wonderful. So he got cancer just before we started Healing Circles. And that one was a stage 1 cancer. We thought we were done with it. And he had success talking to his body to get through pain, talking through his body to avoid painkillers, talking to his body to not bleed in surgery when they had 4 pints of blood ready and thinking they would need it. So he had his own trail of his own success. But then he's diagnosed with glioblastoma, stage 4, absolutely horrific diagnosis. Again, no cure, but really nothing on the horizon. There wasn't that pill that I got to have. The standard of care is harsh. No other trials have shown any promise. So it was a different beast. And Kelly had the same experience I had, that in my Qigong classes, he started entering this world. He called it the farmhouse. And in the months before he was diagnosed, that farmhouse, which at first was just doors and windows that he opened and closed, started to be inhabited by a monster in the attic. And then he ends up with a big giant mass in his head. So that was a very telling imagery. So Kelly did not have to go through the doubt that I went through, because he'd already been through it with me. He was ready to throw himself into this, what he called at first, healing by metaphor. He used his Reiki. He would take individual images that would come to him, and he always put the faith in the body. He would say, you know how to do this. You know how to restructure these brain pathways. This is an element that needs to find an escape route. You know that. But I'm going to provide perhaps this metaphor field that will help you. And using that, he again was able to have a lot of success. When he started the chemo and he had a lot of nausea, he was able to go into this place and reframe that story and the nausea ended the next day. He was able to stop. He nearly died from a pulmonary embolism, and he had these big, massive clots, and they couldn't bust them. And he was able to keep it under control without meds. But at the end, of course, he couldn't heal himself. But what this inner place became for him was sanctuary. And I too found that. I didn't go looking inside for sanctuary. I went looking inside for healing, but I found it. Marty Rossman suggests that you find your own healing Glen, he called it, and see if there's a guide. And a guide came to me that I called her a goddess. I didn't have any framework to put her in, but she was all love, all forgiveness, all compassion. And when I needed comfort, I would go and be held by her.
What did she look like?
Well, that I think is super interesting, because I think, like the stories of life after life, they look like what is in you to see. And as a child, I loved the Greek myths. I'm named Diana,
Mm-hmm.
and I learned them all. And so she had a very Greek goddess feel.
Which goddess? Which goddess do you think she was?
Well, I did not name her. She was, she was the proportion of a Greek hero, which is actually just 1 foot taller than a human. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah.
She could hug me. I could feel very closed in her arms.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, and I didn't try to connect her to any other structure, any other tradition. In retrospect, I would probably call her Aphrodite, because she was just love. That's just who she was. So I think it's very, very interesting that Kelly, this monster in the attic, transformed, kept transforming, and became the wise man. He called it WHYS. And he acknowledged that as human beings, we don't really get anywhere close to the real sense of why. So this guy kept saying, doesn't matter, don't worry about it. You're not going to really get to the essence of why. But he turned into the creature from The Shape of Water, that wonderful, beautiful, amphibious he-she creature that heals, that has the power of healing.
Like the mother, father, creator.
Yes, or
that place where the masculine and feminine meet, and
yeah, just like your poem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The other interesting thing that happened to Kelly was, so I think Kelly's journey was all about love. Mm. He really felt that his job was to love the cancer. Mm. And so this creature that at first was chained, that was just this nebulous monster, it's transformed into this total healing and loving creature. And then someone else shows up. It's a young girl. She's called Elena. She's his cancer too. But he can't stand having this other in his inner world, and she becomes beloved. And so then Glio shows up. So Glio is the cancer, glioblastoma. And again, he integrates Glio, and Glio becomes loved. Glio is Huck Finn, and Elena is this beautiful young Latina girl. Each time he brings in Timur. Timur is his tumor. Mm-hmm. And again, Timur is like Tom Sawyer. He gets brought in and he gets loved. And by the end, he's bringing in everybody around us with cancer. He's bringing them into his inner sanctuary to love them.
I remember so vividly when my wife Cheryl was with you all, and she had a breast cancer, And I remember Kelly saying to her, Cheryl, why don't you just give me your cancer? And you also, for another friend of yours, he did the same, right?
Yeah.
So this, I mean, I just want to say, and is Kelly's Healing Bridges thing still up?
Yeah.
Because what Kelly did with Healing Bridges was just extraordinary. I mean, he blogged Caring Bridge.
Yeah.
He blogged every day.
Yeah.
And so all those who loved him got to share in this amazing journey he was on.
And it became, this farmhouse overflowed with people, and then it becomes a lawn, and then it becomes an amethyst lake. It kept increasing in its dimensions as my inner world did. My inner world had a river that I could go to clear the cancer out. It had a viewpoint that I could go to ask my questions. It had a meadow that others could gather in and support me. And so I just say that for those that begin this journey, welcome all of the people that show up, welcome each of the places that show up. And when there's a daily practice of it, it just keeps getting richer. What I realized after it was that when I wasn't practicing as much, I lost it. My intellectual mind came in and, wrested back control. And it was hard to get back to this intuitive place. So I understand when people say, but I don't do that. Well, yeah, because the busyness of life is so present. But I say, yeah, but when you need it, it's there for you. And that's what happened for Kelly. But what I then transitioned to, because it was a more, quote, reliable place I could always get to, was this inner energy world. My Qigong meditations, I could run 24/7. I didn't have to have that element of waiting for the image and, hoping it would come.
Isn't that interesting? I wonder if that is true for most people or whether that's just the way you're constructed. I would imagine that different people are constructed differently in terms of ongoing access to imagery versus energy, healing. That's just a guess. But I would think that some people would be able to sustain that. I certainly know for myself that when life brings me close to the edge, there's this sense of an awakening and, a presence that I don't otherwise have. And that how easy it is, as you've said, to go away from that. I think for myself that intuition seems to be always present for me. And in many ways, it's about my work. It's about, the way I've worked for 40 years is that, people say, how do you find these people? And what it is really is I don't go looking for them. I recognize them. There's this, like when you and Kelly decided to get married and looked at each other. And I just seem to recognize people with whom I'm supposed to work or who are going to become really beloved friends. And there's just this recognition. And I think for me, what happens, particularly with beloved friends, is that is one of my strongest portals to the divine. When the Sufis say the friend with a small f leads to the friend with a big F, meaning the divine. And Plato said the same thing, that through loving human friends, beloveds, it actually opens us to the divine. And so you and I both know this, there are an infinite number of paths to this. So how long ago did Kelly die now?
3 months.
And what has the last 3 months been like for you?
Grief is it's an amazing process. it is so present. It is so varied, has been my experience. Our grief counselor here at Healing Circles Langley once showed me a chart of the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual symptoms or challenges that grief provides. And at the time I looked at this, like 28 symptoms. And knowing that was true has really helped me in my own grief, because at the beginning I'm just floating. I'm not even on the earth. There's the question, do I stay, really? My son luckily got food in front of me. But as that shifted, I still find all of the 28 coming into play. And so what I'm needing to do in order to honor my grief is just what you described, of that intuitive check-in. So I do that throughout the day. I come to my computer, or I come to food, or I come to anywhere, and I go, how am I? And if I'm confused, if I'm foggy, if my memory is poor, all of these are grief symptoms. If my stomach doesn't feel well, if my soul feels heavy, those are all grief symptoms. And I now recognize it. I go, oh, you're grieving. And you need to not do, you need to go be with your grief. And so I do that throughout the day. And sometimes I just need a cup of tea. And sometimes I need to take the rest of the day off. And sometimes I need to take the next 4 days off. And so it's been interesting to me that I'm doing this during COVID, because my normal way of getting through life's challenges, as we started, is to reach for the support of others. And I still have that support, but I'm finding that I need to be able to spend time companioning these different feelings, these different emotions. And that's what I'm doing. But I would like to share one more thing about Kelly and the farmhouse, because the giant surprise to me, because we've talked about how every inner world is different, every inner world works differently. This was Kelly's, this was mine. I found that I can go into the farmhouse. That Kelly, in fact, had prepared me in the way he prepared everything to take care of me. And even beyond his death, he still had created this place of comfort for me. And so I'd like to just share 3 different times that I've been able to do that. So right after he died, I found myself in the farmhouse, Kelly on the couch, his wise Kiki on the couch, all the kids all over the place, and Kelly just holds me on the couch. And it's exactly like the scene in our living room, because there were 16 to 18 of us when Kelly died, all circling him, all ages. And so there was this feeling, we can still do this. We can still hold each other. But when I went back 6 weeks later, maybe even 2 months later, and tried to go to that place, the farmhouse is empty. There's no furniture. It's a white room, only Kelly in it. And I just run to him and I hug him, and I just can't believe how marvelous it is to be in connection with him. And he's just as excited, and that's all that exists in the world for us. And then I notice, where is everybody? And he goes, oh, they're out back. They're busy. And that starts to trigger a thing in me, like I believe it's the Buddhist tradition, that, they're with us for a while and then they move because they're going to go be reincarnated. And there's this feeling of, oh dear, I'm going to lose this. So when I went back into the farmhouse another day, I'm respectful. I'm going, well, maybe they're busy. I'm not going to just walk on in the door. I'm going to sit at the very edge of the world, the very edge of the lawn, and I'm going to just wait for somebody to show up. And one of the young girls, Teodora, comes up and says, Kiki, the wise man, wants me to take you sailing. She takes me by the hand. She takes me down to the dock. And all of this world Kelly's created. You know, the characters, the dock, the lawn, the amethyst lake. This is all his world, but I'm in it. And she takes me sailing. And at one point, she puts my hand on the tiller and she says, you can steer your own boat now. And I say, but no, I can't. You know, there's going to be a big storm and I'm going to capsize and I'm going to drown and I'm not going to be able to handle the big storm. And she says, no, you can steer your own boat. And besides, the amethyst lake is always safe. It will never capsize you and it will never overwhelm you. And so I took that as not only Kelly saying, you know, you're okay. You will be able to do this. But also to say, this inner world is not a scary place. This inner world is a place you can face tough things, but without being overwhelmed. So the last one, I'm doing my Qigong meditation, and it happens to be what's called the extraordinary universe, which is what connects us beyond. And Kelly shows up. He's in a tree. He's in a tree fort. And he reminds me of the walk we had taken in the old growth forest, where I felt so held by these magnificent survivors and the whole bed of roots and mycelium that nurture and hold us underneath, as well as the canopy holds us on top. And then he goes, Diana, look, it doesn't matter that I'm in the tree. It doesn't matter that I have a form. The vastness of the universe will hold you. Remember those pictures that the physicists draw of the galaxies on the fabric of space and time. It will hold you. The vastness will hold you.
Let's just sit with that for a minute. One of the things we do in healing circles is to trust silence. So Diana, let's move from this beautiful internal journey. And let me also say, as you were talking about Kelly, it just brings tears to my eyes because, I'm crying because Kelly was and is such a beautiful soul, and the two of you had such a beautiful marriage, and your connection with each other and with your family, your children and their spouses and your grandchildren, and your connections together with the whole community and what you created with Healing Circles Langley. And I also feel very called to mention David Spa, who created Healing Circles Houston and has been close to you. He actually had two of his wives come on the cancer help program, and both of them died. So he has been through the loss that you've been through, and he's somebody very beloved and close to us. And really, I think part of the power of Healing Circles is that it's been brought together by a community of people who really love each other, Gretchen Schode at Harmony Hill, Janie Brown at Callanish, we could go on and on with Jennifer Byers, who was at Smith Center and remains a beloved part of our community. Oren Slosberg, our executive director, who's such a powerful part of it. We could just continue, but you are so dedicated to offering Healing Circles. Just tell us where you see Healing Circles Global going. What is taking place now with Healing Circles Global?
Well, it's so exciting because the dream of Healing Circles Global, came to us 5 years ago, and we began the process of meeting and co-creating with others. But because of the restrictions of place, it was difficult to have centers that enough could reach.
Mm-hmm.
So when COVID started, and I was in the middle of my grief process, and I had a Sunday afternoon where I just sobbed the whole day. And then I woke up in the morning and I go, "Phew, you are an essential worker. You need to get up and you need to work." And we got Healing Circles Langley online within a week. By Friday, we had 14 circles online. And this is a population that previously had been called technophobic. But I saw that everybody was willing to give it a try, was willing out of the desperation of the isolation to give technology a try. And because we had all of the hosts already, we had the structure of the website, we just needed to add in Zoom, we were able to do that. And then I took 4 days off and cried. And then I go, wow, this is Healing Circle Global's moment too. We no longer have the restriction of space. We can build something that can truly be of value to bring social support to anyone who needs it. So that's really our vision, and we're just trucking towards it. So in the last month, by next Thursday, we'll have trained over 110 people in how to host a healing circle. And we're asking those people if they would be willing to host public-facing circles. And so we hope in the next 3 weeks to be able to start offering public-facing circles, first of all, to anyone living through this time of uncertainty, to those specifically that are grieving the loss of loved ones, to caregivers, to cancer patients, because this time is a challenging time to be a cancer patient, and most of all to, of course, the beloved healthcare workers that are getting us all through. So that's our vision, and we're just trying to reify it. This is the time to make that real, and I have to say, we just have the most wonderful people showing up at our doorstep, and they're showing up from every state, and they're showing up from, this last training has people from Slovenia, Qatar, Scotland, France, India, 3 provinces in Canada, 13 states. So we're hopeful that, in fact, we can make possible that dream.
Let's just go back into the silence for a minute. Well, as the time comes to a close, a couple of people have asked the name of the book again, and they got the author right, but the book is actually called Prayers of the Cosmos. Prayers of the Cosmos by Neil Douglas Klotz. And there's a foreword by Matthew Fox, and Fox says, "Reader beware, though this book is brief, it contains the seeds of a revolution." And before I ask Diana to sing, I want to briefly read you the translation of the Beatitudes. And as you all know, the Beatitudes are just a very core part of the Christian tradition. So here's one possible new translation of the Beatitudes. Tuned to the source are those who live by breathing unity. Their, quote, "I can," unquote, is included in God's. Blessed are those in emotional turmoil. They shall be united inside by love. Healthy are those who have softened what is rigid within. They shall receive physical vigor and strength from the universe. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for physical justice. They shall be surrounded by what is needed to sustain their bodies. Blessed are those who, from their inner wombs, birth mercy. They shall feel its warm arms embrace them. Aligned with the One are those whose lives radiate from a core of love. They shall see God everywhere. Blessed are those who plant peace each season. They shall be named the children of God. Blessings to those who are dislocated for the cause of justice. Their new home is the province of the universe. Renewal when you are reproached and driven away by the clamor of evil on all sides for my sake. Then do everything extreme, including letting your ego disappear, for this is the secret of claiming your expanded home in the universe. For so they shamed those before you. All who are enraptured, saying inspired things, who produce on the outside what the Spirit has given them from within. So let's just go into the silence again for a moment. Diana, will you close for us with a song?
Kind friends all gather round. There's something I would say. What brings us all together here has blessed us on its way. Love has made a circle that holds us all inside. When strangers are as family, loneliness can't hide. You must give yourself to love. Love is what you're after. Open up your heart to the tears and laughter and give yourself to love. Give yourself to love.
Diana, beloved friend, beloved partner in the work, brings tears to my eyes. Just tears of gratitude for this great work and the great work all of our friends at Healing Circles Langley, Healing Circles Houston, up at Callanish, at Harmony Hill, at Smith Center for Healing and the Arts. Our friends who are starting centers in Bangkok and in India and in Zurich and just all around the world. What a blessing it is in these times to find each other and to hold each other. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thanks to everybody here that listened.
Yeah, we had about 80 people who stayed with us. And I also just want to say to everyone that please be sure to sign on to get the notices of who's coming up. And please consider doing the training with healingcirclesglobal.org. Join us in offering this work and spreading it to those with ears to hear and eyes to see. So, and if you find yourself able to contribute to Healing Circles Global or to the learning community that is bringing you these morning sessions through the new school, it's all done on homeopathic budgets, and we welcome and need your support. Especially grateful when you put it on a credit card and it repeats, like what you might spend at Starbucks if you were able to go out to Starbucks. Just think about a Starbucks coffee 4 times a month or something like that. So anyway, bless you all. Diana, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah. Take care.